So this is the second in the series on full spectrum meditation practice. And there are three key principles or key types of meditation that we're paying attention to. And I'm muting everybody because there's background sound, but you can always unmute if you need to speak to me. So there are three types of meditation. The first is awareness practice, which is just watching how forms arise in consciousness. Then there is relational meditation, when you're relating to some higher power that seems separate from you. From the point of view of awareness practice, everything is one. There is sort of no distinctions, but I'm just going to turn off chat because I find it so distracting. I find it hard to present when there's chat messages going across the screen. And so then the third form of meditation is psychological meditation, where the purpose of that is different to the first two forms. So awareness practice is to discover who your fundamental, essential nature, what it is to be human, and what it is to be divine, perhaps. And relational meditation, where you have some higher power, some deity, a Buddha, a saint, is about receiving transmissional blessings or support from a higher power. And psychological meditation is about bringing healing, bringing support, bringing resources to places in your, well, firstly, just to help you be as great as you can be in the world, to really maximize your resourcefulness in the world. But secondly, to bring support, love, care, healing to places in you that are wounded or vulnerable or tender. And and all of those meditations together are great as a daily practice. And they can be done in lots of different ways. And I'm teaching you how it is that I do those practices. What I've done, however, since the first session is split awareness practice into two sessions. So originally, the first three sessions were, session one was awareness practice, session two was relational meditation, session three was psychological practice. But at the end of last session, I thought it would be really great to do a session on awareness in the body. The main focus in last session, for those of you who are here, was to really notice the difference between attention that is curious and jumps around. And, so you're paying attention to your feet one moment, you're paying attention to sounds the next moment, you're paying attention to all the different senses. And attention has quite a narrow beam, and it jumps around paying attention to all the different things that are in your experience, that are in your awareness. And then last session, then we took one step back from that, which was to try and pay attention to the field in which all the things you see, all the things you hear, and all the things you feel arise, and smell and taste as well. And quite a lot of different ways of doing that. It's, one technique that I use that I've just found fun, it was just an idea, which was, could I feel the brain cells where sight arrived, where sounds arrived, where feelings arrived? Could I feel that place in the brain that recognizes all of that? So it's somehow stepping back and noticing the one, the person, or, the person's too strong a word, but who is it or what is it that experiences sights and sounds and feelings arising? And that is super interesting topic. And we used a classical metaphor for that, which is that awareness itself is like a mirror. The mirror never changes, but everything reflected in it changes. So the one thing you can be sure of in life is that awareness is present, never changing like an open sky, but you've got thunderstorms, you've got clouds, you've got rain, you've got temperature differences taking place within that field. And so that's where the great mystics take refuge, ultimate refuge, is in the constancy of awareness or source in which everything arises. And depending on your tradition, you use different words to describe it, whether it's awareness, whether it's Buddha nature, whether it's source, it could be God, but that's, that's, for me, as soon as I say the word God, I think of an old man on a white, a Blake painting of a man in a white nightie sitting on a cloud. So, everybody, you have to find your own words to describe these things, or the words that sit comfortably with you from your own tradition. It's really important to emphasize that the mystics say that words are not the thing itself. Words are not the experience. And so do the neurophysicists, the neuroscientists. It is the right brain, that's what neuroscience now says, that experiences the world. And it's the left brain that makes conceptual maps of what you experience. So your thinking about your experience is only a map. It's only a map that you're paying attention to. And of course, maps are limited. That's the old joke about what would be a map. How would you make a map that, that has all the detail of the territory? And, the answer is, well, it would be 1 inch to 1 inch, i.e. the map would be the same size as the territory that you were trying to landscape, so it's a sort of impossible equation, isn't it? So the essential thing is that words and language and thinking are useful to point us in the right direction. They help us in the right direction, but they also interfere with us having the experience because there's a danger that we look at our maps, our cognition, our thoughts, our traditions, rather than at the experience itself that is beyond words. That because it's so poetic, it's so somatic, it's always changing, and therefore the verbal descriptions have to change as well. Zen Buddhism has a saying, which is that the path doesn't go all the way. And if you listen to the mystics of any tradition, the practices and the rituals of the tradition are really supportive for a beginner. But when you become advanced, you have to let them go. Within Christianity, I think 15th century mystic who wrote The Cloud of Unknowing, he talks about that you lean into the cloud of unknowing with a fierce dart of love, waiting for source, he would say, God, to penetrate through the other side. But he also talks about you have to find the cloud of forgetting, that the monks who are doing these practices are having to forget all the theology they've ever learned. And you'll see the same in all the other mystical traditions, that at some point you have to give up your theology, your story, your narrative, your intellectualization, and pay attention to what is actually occurring in the moment. And so awareness practice is the entry into that. We've done a great job with mindfulness, taking all the religiousness out of mindfulness. And there are lots of very obvious benefits. Managers who practice mindfulness get better feedback from their staff than managers who don't. There's lots of good stuff on it. Great way to reduce stress and anxiety, all sorts of benefits. And that's fine. That's a great way to get people involved. But the original intention of these practices was to discover what it is to be human and divine, or what is it to discover who you truly are. And so that's super exciting. And when I do those practices, by the way, I do find that just by bringing my attention to the present moment, I've stopped thinking about my worries from the past. My mother didn't love me as a baby. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but something happened yesterday that's bothering me. Or there's some meeting that's happening today that's bothering me. And a lot of the time, we're halfway between the past and the future. We're on some journey between past and future. And that just the simple practice of coming to the present moment in awareness, we can relax a bit. If there isn't the problems of, if there isn't the story of our past, and if there isn't the story of our future, life is quite good, generally. Even if you're doing meditation when you've got toothache, by getting beneath the story, getting to a deeper level than I'm in the dentist office or I've got toothache. Once you get beneath the story, it's much less bad. It's much better than it was when you had the story. I had some dentistry work a few years ago, and the dentist got upset with me because I got so relaxed I fell asleep because I was no longer in a place called dentist chair. I was just paying attention to awareness itself. So again, mindfulness is something that can be used with pain management as well. It's another application. But really, to have this as a daily practice, to get really present, the most important immediate benefit is that the story of your life, trying to be successful or trying to find the one you love or trying to get the one you're with love you in the way that you want to be, or trying to change your partner so that they're more the way you want them, or whatever it is that you're working hard at, all of that can be let go of for a short amount of time, and you can become close to yourself. So in that awareness practice, just by accepting everything that arises, if you're feeling sad and you're pushing sadness away and say, I shouldn't be sad, that can be hard work. You're just slightly disconnected from where you are. Whereas if you're feeling sad and you say, oh, I'm feeling sad, oh, sadness is arising, then actually you're close to it, and then it's less difficult, or anger is arising or fear is arising. So just by welcoming the present moment, life gets better. And you theorizing about it too much isn't really that helpful. It might just give you a point. If you haven't done awareness practice meditation, just do a little bit of it every day, and you'll find that the way to learn is by doing it. That's the way you learn it. The only is by putting in the hours, and doing quite short amounts of practice is a great way to do it. You do a short amount of, it's better to do a short amount of practice 6 days a week. I never say every day, because there's always got to be one day when you've got a hangover, or you're rushing to a meeting, or you want to lie in bed, or whatever. Give yourself, don't make it too arduous. But most days, if you do a short amount of awareness practice, cumulative, that will have a really powerful effect over a medium long period of time. You want to be talking about benefit over a few years, and sometimes you don't even notice that you're learning something. My Aikido, the martial art Aikido, my Aikido master used to say to me, he said, when I was younger, if I went to a class and I learned just one thing, I thought that was great. But he said later, I discovered that if I went to a class and learnt nothing, that was fine, because if I kept going to classes, I'd learn something new at some point. So it's sort of that sort of patience with your practice. And one of the things to just be aware of is that there's nothing wrong with thinking. Thinking is not a bad thing. It's just an overused muscle. It's really, really useful to be able to think, to plan. It's really useful to know the difference between my bank account and your bank account. It's all of that stuff about the difference between me and you is super useful, and is a part of how we've created the beautiful and great stuff in the world. Unfortunately, the overuse, the addiction to it, the overuse of it, fundamentalism around it, has meant that we've also created a lot of problems in the world where we feel separate from each other. We feel separate from nature. And of course, feeling separate from nature and treating nature like it was something we could use is, of course, a massive problem that is going to, it's a massive problem that could destroy the species. So this addiction, we do need to look into this addiction, and each of us individually come back to a more balanced place. In neuroscience, there's this wonderful book that's really quite hard reading, so I'm listening to it on Audible, called, and I can't think of the author now, but it's called The Master and the Emissary. And the somatic mind, the mind that experiences the world, the body, emotion, spirit, mind, experiences the world and is the master, and the emissary, which is the cognitive mind, the left brain, the language brain, the one that makes distinction, is the emissary. But through the education system, going right back to Christianity and the ancient Greeks, and then the Enlightenment, there's been an over specialization in the cognitive mind, the science brain, but that's only making maps, and maps are really useful. Maps are one of the great things about being human. But then the emissary has had a sort of, is trying to do a coup d'etat, or has done a coup d'etat, has tried to take over. The emissary is trying to become the master, or has become the master. And that's where our problems lie. The map-making function serves the experience, our experience of the world. The maps are limited. And so we've got to come back to something more fundamental, which is, you could call it soul, which is body, emotion, mind, and spirit. So there's nothing wrong with thinking. So when you meditate, it's to note the thoughts arise and they stay a while and they disappear if you don't attach to them. If you attach to them, then you think about, and then you suddenly, an hour later, you're still thinking about the thing you thought about before. It's not, so that's not really meditation. Meditation is when you observe it. But if you have a busy mind, I just want to reassure you that if your mind is busy when you're meditating, that's okay. That is the nature of being human, busy minds. That is a part of who we are. And if you don't run with the thoughts, but you don't reject the thoughts, if you just let them come, let them stay, let them go. Even one of the things that I love to try and do is, where does this thought come from? Here's a good question. Where does it come from? Can you catch it as it comes out of it's like a rabbit hole. I think there's some sort of rabbit holes down there. And somehow the thought, can you catch it when it pokes its head out of the rabbit hole? Where does it come from? How does it arise? So the more you can catch it, actually, the less hypnotic and addictive it is, the more you can catch it before it's grabbed your attention, before it's become addictive, the thought. So just sitting and doing your practice, whether you've get to a calm state or not, is a part of the practice, and you don't worry about it too much. Whatever comes up is what is meant to come up. When we come to psychological meditation later on, we'll be able to then be curious about what's come up and wonder what it's saying about us as a being. So it's a diagnostic tool is to just be curious about what comes up. At the awareness practice stage, we're just letting go of it all. But when we come to the psychological practice, then we can say, oh, there's an awful lot of thinking going on about the meeting tomorrow. Maybe I'm feeling anxious about the meeting tomorrow. Let me slow it down a bit and find out what's really going on. So that's a sort of summary of last week's session. And then during the course of last week, I suddenly realized that it's so easy for awareness practice to feel like a mental activity. And that, there's a phrase which, psychotherapists use, which is they talk about spiritual bypass. When I'm in the flow and whatever's going on, it doesn't matter. And when my partner's upset with me, I can just, be detached from it all. And that isn't actually healthy. We have body, emotion, mind, and spirit. And we are, give up your emotions, and what sort of human being are you going to be? It's like I want to have emotions. I want to have feelings, some sort of feelings. I want to probably manage them better myself than taking it out on my partner or my boss or the person in the street. So everything that arises in experience is useful and purposeful, but has to be humanized, has to be worked with to birth it into the human world. So every emotion has a function, but we haven't really been trained how how to be emotional human beings. Where, which class did you have in school? Where's your BA in expressing emotions? We haven't been taught. So sometimes we have emotions that we are ashamed of, or are difficult or damaging or whatever, but it's not the emotion itself, it's the way that we handle it. We'll come to that later on. So in the body, to be awake in the body, that's what this session is about. And just talking a little bit about it, there is so much programming in our culture, from Descartes onwards, and the education systems in all of the modern world, both East and West, focus on the intellect. And then sort of the body is done as a sort of go and play football, or, go and do a sport, do a bit of running, go to the gym, but no real investigation and bringing awareness into the body, exploring what is this thing to have consciousness in the body. If you saw the newsletter this week, I used to quote from a great Buddhist master, which is that so awareness itself is the Buddha. So awareness, the Buddha is not a statue in a temple. That's a very, very externalized form. The awareness itself is the Buddha, and so that's our Buddha nature, which is obscured because we're doing so much thinking and running around. We don't notice. We pay attention to the reflections in the mirror, not the mirror itself. So if awareness itself is the Buddha, and every nerve ending in your body is a point of awareness, then you're a Buddha field. You're a field of awareness. And for me, that's really an exciting place to start. So then how can I explore myself as sacred? How can I be with myself as a field of awareness? And because of my stressful life, I feel my body, and then I feel my tension in my shoulders, a little pinch in the small of my back. As I'm getting older, some parts of me are not working quite as well as they used to. So I complain about my body. It's so easy to be alienated from our body because we're in a society that values rushing around and intellect and purpose-driven consciousness more than it does the systemicness of being a human being. So just beginning to reframe it and say that my body is sacred. And I used a quote in the newsletter, I can't quite remember it, I think it was from Gabrielle Roth, which was, there's 1 billion miles between the top of my head and the tip of my toes. What's happening down there? And so in terms of bringing our awareness into the present moment, if there's a 1 billion miles between the top of my head and the tip of my toes, there's a lot of interesting places to put attention so that I'm not in the past and the future, but I'm in the present moment. And there are two aspects that I want to emphasize. One is that just doing body meditations, or doing meditations that bring us down into our bodies, even as we're sitting, is a beautiful, a powerful practice. And secondly, some people prefer to move as a meditation, which is why Tai Chi is so great, yoga is so great. There are other physical practices that are great meditations. I've been brought up in a Buddhist tradition of sitting meditation. But it's really important for people to know that moving meditation is just as good. And there are all sorts of things like, there's yoga, but there's sort of yoga that focuses really into the body, like Scaravelli inspired yoga. Then there's Feldenkrais. Then there's all sorts of bodywork type of traditions where you can just authentic movement, where you can just feel what's happening in your body. And if that's the tradition for you, there's not everybody has to sit on a cushion. Someone like me, I sit on a cushion, but I also need to come down into my body more. I'm still in the journey of welcoming having a body, welcoming my experience. And so that's sort of two ways that we can work with the body in meditation. But there's something else that's really important as well, which is that if you're in the body, you may notice your feelings. Harder to avoid your emotions when you're in the body. And so then you may find that there's some feeling that through awareness practice, you just allow it to be there. You're not trying to change it. There may be some emotion. And if it's really extreme, then you'd need to go to, trauma, then you'd need to go to, for example, a somatic experiencing practitioner to just feel it gently. But if it's mild, which it is for most of us, most of the time anyway, then we can take that into the psychological practice as an emotion going on that needs holding. But in the awareness stage, we're just saying, welcome, 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 welcome. And in the awareness stage, you can also say, I've got a feeling in my solar plexus, which is hurting, an emotion. But I can hear the sound of the leaves in the trees, the airplane, the sound of the computer. I can feel my feet on the floor. I can see the screen. So that you can use many, many, many points of attention, places in awareness, to sort of hold the space for the place in you that's uncomfortable. So it's not about just going into in the awareness practice, it's not about just going into the feeling and doing primal scream, which might be appropriate, but it's not particularly the purpose of going into the catharsis. It's not the purpose of awareness practice is not catharsis, although catharsis can be a good method. But then you can hold that place in yourself in the bigger field of awareness, with all the other things that are happening. So I'm more than just the difficult feeling in my belly. I'm also the sound of the wind, the warmth of the room, the smell of the warmth of the room, the feeling in my arms, my backside on the chair, my hands rubbing together, all the other things that are going on. It's just, the feeling is just one thing. But then that will lead later on into the psychological practice, when you can say, actually, let me bring my emotional heart to hold myself. We'll come to that later, that we can hold ourselves. But so awareness practice is simply about, let me be close and to what is and welcome what is. So before we get into a meditation on the body, any questions or comments? And it always takes time for people to ask questions, and that's fine with me. And Charlie, if you can turn your camera on, if at all possible. In this group, we like to have cameras on so that we all feel connected with each other. Any questions? Yeah, go on, Lyndon.
Do you have any sort of reaction to using, as it were, guided meditations, where you're listening to a voice telling you, for example, to go into your body, or you read an instruction that kind of gives you a whole load of suggestions on how to do it? Or do you feel things should be more, if you like, spontaneous in how they come?
It just depends on the purpose of your practice. So in awareness practice it's not really guided meditation. In fact, I will do it. I will do a guided meditation on awareness practice. Guided meditation is really great, particularly for relating to an archetypal forms, or Buddhas or saints, or climbing the mountain, and you climb. You can do one where you do a body meditation. You get yourself body down into a deep body and connected state, and then you could do something like you go up a mountain, and you journey up a mountain to find your higher self, and then you get to the top of the mountain, you meet this being who has wise words for you. I mean, so that can be a great guided meditation. And actually, I find guided meditations really useful. In fact, I've got lots of I've made lots of audios from previous series, and they are available if you want them. It's really great for the psychological practice, and it's really great for having someone guide you into a deep state and then saying, is there a saint that wants to talk to you right now? Is there a being? And then suddenly out pops Kermit the Frog with words of wisdom. Who was it? Boris Johnson. Not, I'm sorry to mention his name. Please don't curse me to mention his name. But Boris Johnson was channeling Pepper the Pig, wasn't he? CBI the other day. So you never know who will come and give you advice. And I do know people who, when they talk to higher power, they talk to characters from the storybooks of their childhood. So it's like the mind has, the unconscious has infinite possibilities, and we can do it any way we like. It's your brain, it's your insides. I always think of, no, I won't even say that actually, and there are various spiritual figures, and I think of them in the way that I want to think of them, rather than the way that some religious authority, usually an old man with a white beard or whatever, or tells me that I should think of them, or someone hundreds and hundreds of years ago in a culture that wasn't mine told me to think about something in a particular way. Well, actually, I'd rather, if it's is it a path with a heart? Does it have love? So be creative and enjoy. So one of the ones I have is there's a Tibetan, the wife of Padmasambhava, the founder of Tibetan Buddhism, is called Yeshe Sogyal. And I always see her in, as like my sister. I can see her as a sexy woman. I can see her as a mother, and she hangs out. And at night, if I'm falling asleep, I can put my head on her lap. There's just a lot of, you can be creative about it. Just allow, but it may be someone from the tradition you were brought up in. There may be some character that comes out of that. Maybe Mary Magdalene comes and gives you a cuddle in your meditation. Well, wouldn't that be great? So, but what we want to do, my recommendation is that you, actually, we're slightly off topic because we're talking about next week's session.
Okay.
But I'll just finish my sentence. Is to deconstruct. I basically believe in deconstructing the religions and finding the essence of them, and then find what is the essence of it, and then saying, okay, now how do I relate to that essence? What's the core? I don't have to take all the stuff that has been worked out, handed down the generations to me. Great, good question, Lyndon. I talked about it too long. Anything else about awareness practice and awareness in the body? Okay, we'll take some comments and sharing after the meditation. And so it's quite helpful for me if some people keep their cameras on during the meditation. But sometimes people want to move during the meditation, and they may turn their cameras off. So I just feel more connected to the group when there are some people who've got their cameras on. So the starting point with any meditation practice is just to slow down. So I'm slowing myself down. And I slow down by just paying attention to what is here in this moment. So I'm just scanning my body, not in detail, but just getting a general sense of my body. I noticed Judith taking a sip of water, and actually I need a sip of water. My mouth is dry. And just noticing what you can see around you. And just noticing what you can hear. I find just doing this brings me to more presence, just in a gentle way. Sitting with what I see, what I hear, and what I feel. And many of you know the meditations I do when I say, see four things, hear four things, feel four things, see three things, hear three things, feel three things, two things, one thing. That's just a ritual. But it is helpful to notice that if my eyes are open, I focus on one point, or if my eyes are closed, I can notice several different things at once. So if my eyes are closed, I will have the darkness of my eyelids and specks of light and images in my mind's eye. But I could spend time really focusing on all the little dots that float around and the colors. Just really paying attention to some of that stuff that you can see on the back of your eyelids, if your eyelids are closed, is actually brain noise. It's quite a deep level of neurology. But for those whose eyes are open, you focus on one point and then defocus. And then you can see many things around it. So one of the ways to help yourself get deeply connected is to pay attention to several different things at the same time, listening to three different things at once. And then feeling. Always good to feel something in your skin, something in your muscle, and something in the trunk of your body, the emotional center of your body. And some people like to talk about chakras, but it gets a bit too concrete, They all have very specific colors and things. But there are energy centers, aren't there? There's your throat. There's your chest. Solar plexus. Behind the belly button. Lower in the pelvis, your sex, your lower part of your body. And some systems have 7 chakras and some have 5 and some have 6. Doesn't really matter. It's paying attention to the trunk of the body that's important, to your experience there. It's movements of energy. But we can say that, there's the head brain and the heart brain and the belly brain. And we're wanting to pay more attention to the belly brain and the heart brain. That belly brain that can feel the emotions of people when you meet them. And that can be very sensitive to being hurt, but it can also be really joyful and ecstatic. So let's pay attention to the body. I find it really helpful to notice the skin on my scalp and the tips of my toes. And somehow in the background, Wonder about all the sensations in between. Starting with the toes. Notice the skin. And if you're wearing socks or tights or just shoes or bare feet, what's the temperature? What's the pressure? What's touching them? And then if you wiggle your toes, you can feel the muscles, but also the joints as well. And then the muscles in the sole of the foot, the arches of the foot. My mind is telling me that there are lots of different bones, but I can't actually feel them independently. And then the pad of my heel. And then just how all the bones in the foot join to the ankle. And then there's the calf. Can't really feel the big bone in my lower leg, but I can feel my knee and feel my ankle. And I do have some sense that there's something in between. I can feel my calf muscles and tendons. So again, there's the skin of your lower leg. Various sensations in different parts of your lower leg. And there's also the muscle of the calf. And then there's the knee. And then the thigh. And the first thing I always go to with the thigh is those big muscles at the back that wrap up around the buttocks, attached to the sacrum. But also then I can feel the muscles on the top of the thighs. I don't know if I'm feeling the thigh bone or I'm feeling the way that the thigh bone is connected with the muscles, and the way that the thigh bones sit. I'm sitting on the top end of the thigh bones and the pelvis. Just being curious. This is not an anatomy lesson. This is a sort of lesson in bringing curiosity and interest. I thank my feet for carrying me around the world. I thank my knees. I thank my sit bones and my backside for making me comfortable. And then there's all those muscles around the back, and then also up the front, and all the viscera, the internal organs. You may have done Pilates or yoga, so you may be able to feel your pelvic floor. And the muscles in that part of the body. The lower belly. And there are so many organs packed in there that I can't really differentiate, but I'm curious. I can feel the muscles at the back, supporting my spine. And I can feel the skin of my belly and the muscles, probably abdominal muscles, at the front. At this point, I often like to just go to my breathing. And I'll tell you why in a moment. As I breathe in through my nose, you feel the hairs moving slightly. And then just really paying detailed attention to how the breath goes down the throat into the lungs. And the expansion of the rib cage. The ribs actually separate as you breathe in. And then the pressure of the lungs down onto the solar plexus, into the belly, makes it feel like I'm breathing right down into my belly. How far does it feel like you're breathing when you take a deep breath in? How far down? Does it go down to the base of your spine? Just been really curious and interested about all these points of awareness. And so then feeling my belly with the movement of my breath, that my belly gets moved by my breath. And it feels to me anyway that energy, chi, ki, moves in my belly as I breathe. There's so much to explore. All the muscles around the rectum and the sex, and all the guts. Just noticing how breathing affects it all. Feel on the outside, you can pay attention on the outside, the way the belly button rises and falls. As you go up the spine at the back, shoulder blades, how do they feel? Shoulders. Since my shoulders can get tense, I often just put my hands on my lap and then invite my shoulders, your shoulders, to relax. And I can just feel the muscles of the shoulders, the muscles of the upper arms, lower arms, and then fingers. And then I notice my neck muscle. I turn my head a little just to feel that. In the way that my neck muscles go to my scalp, wrap over my head, and feel my facial muscles. Feel my tongue. Sometimes it's nice to scrunch the face and then relax it. Or to notice if there's tension in the jaw. Now, I want us to try an experiment. Take one part of your body, it could be a finger, and start making very small movements. Rhythmic movements, so that you can attend to them. Isn't it interesting to really feel very small movements? You could just move a single finger for a while back and forth. And then I start to wonder about how the finger is attached to my hand. And I just wonder what happens if I move my hand a little. I've lifted my hand, so my arm feels quite heavy. But I'm interested, so having gone from the finger, starting to pay attention to the hand, it's actually engaged my arm. Now, of course, you know what your arm looks like, but what does it feel like from the inside? If you let go of the image and you just get the feeling, you might want to move more fingers as you do this. Just the fear on the inside. Or perhaps other parts of your body want to move a little. It's a great way of exploring the body. Or you might just find that you're interested in a little rock. If I lean to one side, all the muscles open on the other side, and the muscles tighten on the side in which I'm leaning. So I can just do gentle movement to bring my awareness into my body. Just exploring the movement in your body is a whole practice in itself. To take you down more into your body. And we could spend a whole 20 minutes on gentle movement, just paying attention to gentle movement. But I want us to also just give a little attention to the energy systems of the body. So while you're continuing to do your gentle movement, are there any feelings you would call emotions in your body? In your throat? Or in your, what's called the heart? It's actually the center of the chest. It's an energy center rather than the physical heart. But where do you experience your heart? And is there anything in the solar plexus above the belly button or around the belly button? What are the sensations? Or beneath the belly button, down into your pelvis? Later, when we do psychological meditation, we might bring the heart to the solar plexus or to places that need it. Or we might find the power of Tan Tien, the center in the belly. There's a power there. Or maybe there's a longing that you feel that might experience as a pain, but is actually a longing for something, a message. But really just to come back to pure awareness practice itself. Notice what you experience in the body and let it be. Just be with it. The only exception would be if it's painful, then include other things as well. Include the field of awareness. I can hear a number of different things. I can hear in the street. I can hear the echo in this room. I can hear house sounds. I can hear my heart beating now. I can hear the inner voice, internal dialogue, but I'm not attaching to it. I'm not believing it. It's just one of the many things arising in the field of awareness. I can hear my breathing. And there are so many things you can feel in this moment. And there may be images in your mind's eye as well. Letting it all be here. Just welcoming it all. One of the fastest ways to change a feeling is to welcome it and not seek to change it, to accept it and to welcome it. The feeling works its way through of its own accord. Just welcoming yourself. This is your experience now. It's different to what you were experiencing 5 minutes ago. It's different to what you'll be experiencing in 5 minutes' time. It doesn't mean anything other than the meaning you give to it. Just let it be. This is the flow. This is where you are now. It will change. In the flow, the good news is that all the bad things will change. And the bad news is that all the good things will change. So, but one thing that won't change is flow, is the constant arising moment by moment of things in awareness, like a river running through awareness. So I recommend awareness practice as a daily practice to discover that this is the true you, this flow, not the identity you sell to your work colleagues, not the good guy or good woman or bad guy or bad woman or good daughter, good son that you sell to your family. This flow is the true you. How interesting. And the more you explore this, the more you'll discover. So when you're ready, I'd like you to stay deeply connected with yourself, but orientate your eyes back to the screen and to the group, to see the group on the screen, so that we can just begin to prepare for an exercise. And so the basic process, important thing in these exercises is that one person talks and the other 2 or 3 people listen. And that you really pay attention. You don't look at your phone or run to the loo or do anything. You really give the person your full attention. And that you let them speak for, it's not very much time. It's going to be a short amount of time. You let them speak. You don't give advice. You don't give suggestions, but you can say, tell me more. But really at the end, if you really want to give a suggestion, you can ask them, you can say, do you want a suggestion? But we're not really here to give each other advice. We're not here to sell each other our services or to promote ourselves to each other. So it'll be 21 minutes. In the group of 3, you'll have 7 minutes per person. In the group of 4, you'll have 5 minutes per person. I'll ask the group of 4 to do its own timing, and I will do the timing for the group of 3. And so the question for the conversation is, how did you experience this meditation? And what did you learn from this meditation? And perhaps how might you use this in the future? What did you experience? What did you learn? How might you use this in the future? So groups are starting now. You've got 21 minutes in total starting now in your groups. So great to have you back. with the exception of Rita. If you can turn your cameras on, that's great. And great to have you here, back from the exercise. How was it for you? One of the weird things for me is that I'm sitting here in the main hall while you're all off having psychedelic experiences in your I have no idea what's going on, you know, so I'd love to hear. How was it for you?
I mean, I found it really helpful because the meditation was really good. I liked all the detailed body scan, as I would call it, and then it brought up all sorts of different things, like, you know, as I'm getting older, I'm getting more aches and pains, so I was more aware of all my stiff joints and how I need to exercise and move a bit more in different ways. Yeah. But the peacefulness of coming into yourself and knowing that you're a different entity almost when you're in a meditative space, and you're not the person you are in the outside world with your family and work or whatever. Yeah, that was quite nice. That feels like a privilege. You've got a special space when you're just you.
That's the real you. The rest of it sort of is your avatar. I just want to say that, so all the thoughts about you know, aging and muscles and needing to stretch, in a pure awareness practice, you let those go. In a psychological practice later on, you then say, oh, how might I take these into action? So it's quite helpful to be clear at which phase in the practice you are, because and I'm not good at this, you know, but pure awareness practice is just to let it all go. But then the psychological practice is actually, there's a message here, there's something that I can do. What resources do I need to, you know, to find an activity that will help my, you know, physical body? Because, you know, from 40 onwards, we need to do exercise, we need to do muscle building, you know, but how do we do that in a way that we want to do, you know, rather than sit at home eating biscuits, thinking about the exercise we want? How do we find a way of doing it in a way that is really, you know, grabs our souls and we can't wait for it, you know? Great comment, Katie. Who wants to go next? Heather. And you're on mute, Heather, so save your...
Okay. What I came for was, I'm doing a lot of thought about prayer life.
About what? Prayer life?
Prayer, yeah. And so I guess that as meditation grows, so does your prayer life grow. Maybe wrong.
Yes.
Might not have got it right. And so that's why I came. And I wanted to know what you felt the end result of a deep meditation should be. Would it be in well, it will be a better walk with my God, whatever my God would be. But it was just, I've still got lots of thoughts churning around in my head.
Great. Let me respond to that. Actually, I need to correct what I just said, which was, if you have a tradition that has the word prayer in it, then a meditation practice may enhance your prayer life. So if somebody was just doing awareness practice, they might start beyond any tradition. So there really are these two distinct forms of spiritual meditation. There's awareness practice, which could be beyond any tradition, whether it's because you come from no tradition, or because you're such an advanced mystic that you've gone beyond the concepts of your own tradition. There are two poles. There's one pole which is you're not even connected to any tradition, and the other pole is you're such an advanced mystic that you've gone beyond language. So, But so there are these two forms. So there's the awareness practice and there's a relational meditation, which is really prayer. Although advanced prayer is to be just to be present. It is a sort of worship. It is a sort of, you know, if there's something that's there, that's Buddha nature or awareness or source, or some people might use the word God, but other people don't like the word God. But if there's something there, then awareness practice can be a way of just being, it is a way of just being it. But for most people, the word prayer, there's some sort of conversation. So that is what I would call relational practice, where, you know, from an awareness practice point of view, so the awareness is everything, awareness is source, you know, the mystic, you know, God is in everything, is everything, source is everything. There's nothing that exists that isn't source. So then out of awareness, you project into the sky an image of Jesus or Buddha or Rumi or Muhammad or some other saint, you know. You project an image and then you pray to the image in the sky of the saint that you projected out of awareness. And at the end of the practice, it drops back into awareness itself. From an awareness point of view, from a non-dual point of view, there is no me and no Buddha. That's very theoretical, isn't it? So, but in the awareness practice, you're just looking for what is. And there's a point with awareness practice. So the initial stages of awareness practice, there's me observing everything. And you learn that, you practice, and it gets quieter and it gets quieter and it gets quieter and it's quieter. And then some point you have to relax just a little, because to the point where there's no, it happens spontaneously, by the way, you can't make it happen. You just relax, you've done it so often that you just relax a little and there's no you observing anymore. There just isness. And then, and that lasts for a short amount of time. And then over a period of time, that's called the non-dual. There's no you, there's no observer anymore. There just is. So in relational, so when you say, does this take you, if you're a part of a tradition that prays, that will take you more deeply into that tradition, you know, so mystical Christianity, mystical Islam, mystical Judaism, mystical Buddhism will take you more deeply into that. Does that sort of answer your, and the other answer is there's no place to get to. So from,
that's what I want.
Yeah, if you listen to, so there is nowhere to get to in any of the mystical traditions. You know, the ultimate place is that, you know, that you accept where you are. I don't like talking about Christianity because there are sometimes people who have, for very good reasons.
Yes,
May I finish?
Okay.
Thank you. But I'm going to, but I just want to mention it because I think it's such a good example. The difference between accepting exactly what is and fighting what is exemplified with Jesus going to the cross. You know, I mean, it's something, you know, he accepted, and he didn't fully accept. So I don't want to go into the full story, but by and large, he was willing to accept what was, what is. And so that's the non-dual state of practice where you just accept what there is, nowhere to get to. There is, when people begin Buddhism, they think it'll make them feel better about themselves. Actually, that's not the purpose of it. The purpose is to feel, to accept, to notice that you have awareness, to notice you have sacred nature, whether you're feeling good or whether you're feeling bad. Usually it will help you feel better, but that's not the purpose of it. The purpose is to stay close with and accept and welcome what is. Do you have anything to add to that, Heather?
Well, no, I think that all I'm trying to think it through is if I was in love totally, and if someone totally loved me, I would expect to be able to sit with them and just be with them without saying a word or having to do anything. And that's what I'm trying to achieve in my time of meditation with what my God was. And I'm trying to be very careful about not upsetting any other people.
Oh, that'd be
That's
upsetting.
Thank you. Let me just comment on that. And I think Gianrico was next. Are you next, Gianrico, for comments? But the point that I wanted to make to that was the thing to relax a little bit is the trying to achieve. If you're talking about using love as a metaphor. If I sort of try too hard when I'm sitting with my partner to like be present and just sit and, then it can all be a bit contrived. And I just somehow have to relax a little bit. So they talk about leaning into presence, leaning into awareness, leaning into source. You sort of lean towards it. But actually, one of the things that they talk about in all the traditions, which I think is really beautiful, is that you don't have, in fact, trying too hard stops it from happening,
Absolutely.
like, I'm just going to put you on mute. Trying too hard stops it from happening. But if you lean in the direction of awareness, if you lean in the direction of source, if you lean into what some people call God, it comes back, it wants you. So awareness wants to be known by you. God wants to be known by you. Source wants to be known by you. Your original, so a better way, more neutral language perhaps, is your original nature wants to be known. Your original nature wants to be known by you. So you only have to lean in a little. You don't have to try too hard. And you've got to, so this word grace, which is, so you can't, your ego mind cannot make it happen because it's something that's beyond your ego mind. That purpose-driven mind can't make it happen. Your purpose, the best your purpose-driven mind can do is take you to prayer, take you to meditation, have you lean in. But after that, you have to wait. You have to wait for something to come back, to arise naturally. To come back the other way is one way of saying it. If you're leaning in, something comes back the other way, but you could say to spontaneously arise. You can't make it happen. The ego mind, it's beyond the ego mind. The problem is the ego mind. So therefore, the ego mind, which really thinks it can make it happen. If I understand it, it'll all work out. If I just get it clear in my head, then I'll be enlightened. I'll be a mystic. I'll be one. Getting it clear, it's about getting beyond your head. The cognitive mind has its really important uses. It's really, really, really important, but it's a toolkit for the soul, and the soul is much more than the cognitive mind. The cognitive mind is just a tool, and that's where we've gone wrong in history. I'm going to go to Gianrico, and then I'm going to go to Paul after.
Yeah, just you remember, because you say dualistic, no, or non-dualistic, and
Yeah.
Just an experience I had last Sunday. I brought I bring my children, the 3 children, to make communion lessons, no, and then after it's a Catholic church, and the Catholic priest there in a certain point said, I think that nobody really understand what he wants to say. A quite Vedantic, non-dualistic concept. God is not from this dimension. And I said, wow. Every time I ask myself, well, what I am doing here in this church, but and it really, God, I'm sure it's against the Catholic religion to say God is not from this dimension. Yeah. I was very, very surprised by this non-dual way to say it, no, in a Roman Catholic church. That's what I want to say.
Someone got angry with me the other day because I said, it sort of says in the Bible that we're made in the image of God, but actually I believe that we've made God in our image. We've sort of taken our little rational world and our narratives and our stories, and we've constructed something, a picture of God, which is actually much, much less than the source. If you talk about the relationship between source, non-existence and existence, there's something, why is there, one of the first questions in philosophy is, why is there existence? Why is there existence? What is so if there's non-existence, and then suddenly the universe occurred, whatever your theory is, what is that transition from non-existence to existence? What is that process? And that is way, way beyond you know, we can have a nice story. You know, there are many thick books constructing stories about this. You know, every tradition has multitude of books to construct stories around this, but those stories are just stories. I mean, I like the idea of there are many ways up a mountain. You know, if I describe my way up the mountain, it'll sound really different to your way up the mountain. And I may, you know, if I'm a fundamentalist, I'll kill you for not agreeing with my way up description of my way up the mountain. But when we get to the top, we all get to the same place. So Paul, I'm going to give you a chance now. I'm sorry I've been shutting you up. Great. Oh, sorry, go on.
Okay. Thank you, Julian. Obviously, I was just, well, no, I felt I wanted to respond particularly to Heather. Obviously, I speak, as you know, from a deep Christian, but also a what I call interfaith spirituality, and also a philosophy really of the fact that God is no thing and that God is not a human being, or and you know, the image of God is within us is a spiritual, you know, at the level of soul, whatever that metaphor means, the soul, and we've created. The churches have created by a creed, treated a creed which was itself metaphorical. Christ seated at the right hand of the Father was just the way the emperor's, you know, the emperor's right hand man would be there, and the image of God within is spiritual, and I don't relate to a God beyond, out there, other than via the God, the spirit within me, which yearns for connection with the wider universe. And it's a connection which doesn't bypass my fellow human beings or the rest of creation. And in terms of Enrico, what you were hearing was a fragment of the gospel of the day, in which Jesus replies to Pontius Pilate, "My kingdom is not from this world." That means that it's not sourced from this world, rather than that it doesn't relate to this world. So I just clarify that, because Heather, you and I, since I know co-religionists, but it's the spirituality which we need to grow beyond sometimes, beyond what the church, in its control and marshalling of us, has dealt with at a very superficial level. In the conversation last week,
can I stop you, Paul?
Yeah.
Just because we've only got 5 minutes left.
Yeah.
And I want to really make sure, you know, what I'm really interested in is an experience of the sacred that is beyond the description of all the different traditions. So on the one hand, I want, you know, the traditions can be a launch pad to that experience, but I don't want to have to, because you and I and Heather could have a great conversation. We could go on for, you know, several hours, but I don't want the call to be dominated by a conversation about the Christian narrative, because I want us to be, because I want to include other narratives as well. Because for me, all the different narratives, all the different stories are all trying to get to the same thing. So in, you know, the Zen, you know, beautiful Zen Buddhist metaphor, which is, you know, don't look at the finger pointing at the moon, look at the moon, you know, or don't look at the reflection in the water of the moon, look at the moon. But we have to have a finger that points at the moon. But then if you, you know, because you know, we may not notice it, but we don't get obsessed with the finger that points at the moon. And, you know, so it's this difficult thing, and this lovely statement, which is the path doesn't go all the way. The theology, the practice, the tradition doesn't go all the way. And then when you listen to the mystics of all the traditions, they go beyond it. So any questions or comments from anybody from taking a perspective other than Christian, or with feelings that are sort of are not described in that language? I just want to make sure we include that as well. Now, Caroline.
I just want to say that underlying the meditation was is the experience that every part of our body, every cell of our being, every aspect of ourselves is sacred. So, you know, moving the little toe, moving the finger, that's the kind of point I feel of what we were doing today. And that's the invitation. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Great. Who else?
I'll jump in, Julian. I guess I just wanted to say that I don't, from many religious traditions, I mean, I was brought up in one, but it isn't for me. And I've actually found the last bit of the discussion quite alienating. I found the meditation itself really engaging and a very strong experience, and also the little small group conversation afterwards. And I found it really, really hard to stay with the last bit of the discussion because it's mostly doesn't have any meaning for me.
Yeah.
And I hear completely that it does for others, but I guess I'm curious about the experience of including myself when I don't have a view of the divine or the sacred or higher powers or whatever. And I conceive of the universe and of our place in it in kind of very different ways. Yeah, so I'm just noticing that actually I feel quite uncomfortable about that in this moment. And I also feel that I'm very glad I'm here with that discomfort.
I'm really glad you're here. And, you know, for me, finding this place that's beyond the different traditions is so important. And so, you know, that's really what I'm wanting to encourage. I mean, actually, I'm happy to encourage people to go back to their traditions and find the mystical, or to have no tradition at all, but really this place beyond tradition. So really, I'm so happy that you've spoken, Amanda. And, you know, we have to admit that so many of the problems in the world, not that anybody on this call was doing it, but so many of the problems in the world come from people trying to impose their traditions on other groups of people. You know, but you know, I'm not pointing this to anybody on the call, but we all know that all the traditions, and I used to be rather sort of proud of Buddhism because Buddhism by and large didn't impose, but then, you know, in Burma recently, the Buddhist majority population were basically doing genocide against the Rohingyas and chucking them out of the country. You know, the problem is that once you get spirituality involved with institutions, you know, institutions, that you start to get power structures, you start to get parts of the brain that are to do with hierarchy. There's all sorts of other stuff that goes on that isn't really truly spirituality. It's a problem for every single tradition. And there, you know, and we have to just recognize that, but we also not to throw the baby out of the bathwater. So that's why really wanting to encourage everyone to be free to construct their own tradition. You know, I want to support Amanda constructing the Amanda tradition, and, you know, each of us constructing. So I would, you know, I sometimes describe myself as post-Buddhist, you know, although I probably wouldn't say that if any of my Sangha were on the call. It's like really finding that place in your heart, connecting to something bigger than yourself. I realize that we're on time. We can just go on for a while. I always love to end with people saying a word about how you're feeling right now. So can we ask everybody to unmute and just say a word about how you're feeling right now?
Powerful. Interested.
Stimulated.
Inquisitive.
Intrigued.
Thankful.
Relaxed.
Grateful.
Refreshed.
Appreciative of everybody.
Curious.
Revitalized. I don't know if it exists in English, but anyhow, revitalized.
No, we know that word.
Revitalized.
Improved.
So next week, we're going to talk about praying. Praying to whatever it is that you want to pray to.
Or relational.
We're going to talk about praying to, I mean, you know, in China, I sort of say, you know, you could pray to Lao Tzu, you could pray to the Buddha, you could pray to Mao Zedong, and everybody thinks that's funny, but you can pray to whoever, you know, the goddess, the indigenous archetypes. You can pray to, you know, I don't want to be trivialized, but who would be, you know, a storybook character that touches your soul. I know someone who prays to Gandalf, or, you know, so that's what we're going to be talking about next week. The meditation that is about, and to make a separation between the meditation that is about that source is something completely separate from me, or source is something that I have a conversation with. So we're going to talk about the conversation. We're going to do a meditation where you can have your own conversation with whatever archetypal form you want to have your conversation. So that's the fundamental structure, that we can each have a conversation and receive blessings from whatever archetypal forms we can imagine. That's next week's session. Then the week after that, we'll do psychological meditation, and then the week after that, we'll do all three in a single session, and the week after that, we'll do it all very quickly in a short amount of time. It's great to have you here this week, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you for coming. Take care.